Hey guys, it's Raul again, and today I'll be sharing with you guys my favorite books of 2020. So a few months back, I talked about in a life update video about some of the favorite books that I had read so far in 2020. So some of the books that I mentioned in that video I will mention again here. I wasn't planning on making a dedicated video for my favorites, but I went through my list of books that I had read in 2020, and I realized there were a couple more books that I wanted to add in there, some books that I read at the very end of 2020 that are definitely going on this list as well. So I figured let's just go ahead and make a dedicated video on this topic. So before we get started, just go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I post videos every Tuesday and Friday. Now let's go ahead and get started. So the first book on this list of favorites is Secondhand Spirits by Juliet Blackwell. This is the first book in the Witchcraft Mysteries, which is considered somewhat of a cozy mystery series. I don't really read many cozy mysteries, but from the reviews and stuff on Goodreads that I saw, this apparently is very dark for a cozy mystery, which is probably why I ended up loving it so much. This follows our main character, Lily, who is the owner of a thrift store, and she's a witch. She solves mysteries. The main character is Hispanic or Latinx, and this book follows somewhat of a little bit of Hispanic or Latinx culture, because you have throughout this first book, at least, there's a mystery of a murder, and then there are children who are disappearing. So then they weave through the whole kind of mystery of La Llorona. If you guys have not heard of La Llorona before, it's kind of that myth of, you know, the woman whose kids were taken away from her, so now her ghost is going around kind of taking other children. So they're weaving kind of this myth throughout this first book, which is probably why I ended up loving it so much, just because I connected with these stories and with these characters so much, because they were like I was. And I always love finding characters in books that I can connect with, at least culturally. So I really ended up loving this first book. I'm super excited to continue on with this series, hopefully at some point this year. And the next book is one that I have previously mentioned before, and that is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This follows a family whose daughter commits suicide at the very beginning of this novel, and you're following this story of all of the things that happen leading up to the suicide, and then the things that happen after, and how Lydia's family kind of is coping with all of this, is trying to figure out why she did what she did, and then all of the revelations and things that are leading up in kind of Lydia's perspective of why she ended up doing what she did as well. But it just focuses so much on family. I love that this book is centered on this family and on how the family reacts to things and how they're coping with things. I loved this family dynamic. I loved this story about this family. I thought this novel was absolutely incredible, and it 100% had to make my list of favorites this year. The next book on my list is from an author that is probably not going to surprise you, because I mention this author on my channel all the time, and that is Beach Read by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is an autobi author for me. I've said it before. I absolutely love her novels, and this one was no different. This follows our two main characters who are writers, and they kind of are in this kind of writing slump for this new project that they're working on. So they go out of town to this kind of small town to kind of get their creative juices flowing. They meet there, and they kind of challenge each other to write in each other's genres. So one of our main characters is a literary fiction writer, and the other main character writes romances. So they switch genres to kind of get their creative juices flowing, and things kind of kick off from there. These two main characters kind of know each other from their college years, and they're a little bit of rivals. They didn't really get along in college, so it's kind of funny to see their dynamics and kind of how they start interacting now, years after they've graduated college. I ended up absolutely loving this one. Again, this is on a lot of people's favorites list of 2020, because I've seen so many people love this book and praise this book for just being so wonderful, and I feel like this book is it's so comforting and so funny. I love how Emily Henry writes dialogue and how she writes these interactions between these two main characters, and also how she incorporates kind of these very heavy-hitting, harder topics and backgrounds and backstories to these two main characters that just flesh them out so well. It's not just a bubbly contemporary novel. It really deals with a lot of kind of heavier subjects as well, which is another reason why I love Emily Henry so much. And the next book on my list is Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo, another autobi author for me, another author that if she releases a book, it's probably going to land on my favorites list of that year. And this book follows two sisters who don't know that they are sisters. The father ends up dying in a plane crash on the way to the Dominican Republic to visit one of his daughters. And when he dies, they end up finding out about each other. The father has been keeping these families a secret. They don't really know that they exist, and they only find out after this tragedy. So this story follows our one sister who lives in New York City and the other sister who lives in the Dominican Republic. And as they're kind of learning about each other and wanting to find out who they are and wanting to meet for the first time, kind of all of the things that happen when, money gets involved, and now, there's a life insurance policy, and what's going to happen with the money now, how they're going to split it. There's so many different things going on and so many different layers to this story. I love how Elizabeth Acevedo writes her stories and her characters. This one is written in verse, which if you guys weren't aware, Elizabeth Acevedo is an amazing poet. Poet X was written in verse. This one was written in verse. I absolutely loved this one so much. I think it was done beautifully. I love all the different cultural references. Again, anytime that there are Hispanic or Latinx characters in books, I just feel like I can connect with them so much better, and this was absolutely no different. If you guys have not picked anything up by Elizabeth Acevedo, I highly recommend you guys pick up anything by her. But Clap When You Land was an absolutely amazing novel again, and it had to make my list of favorites in 2020. And the next book on my list of favorites is The Last Train to Key West by Chanel Cleeton. This is the third book in Chanel Cleeton's historical fiction series that follows the Perez family. It's this kind of large, epic spanning series that follows this Perez family. Every single book follows a different character in this family, how they are connected, how they intertwine. This family is a very wealthy family back in Cuba. They own, I believe it's sugar, or they trade sugar. And this series follows these family members within Cuba, in the United States as well. This one takes place in 1935 in Florida. And one of the Perez sisters are there during one of the biggest hurricanes in history. So it is somewhat based on true events with the events of this hurricane. So this book was done a little bit differently than Chanel Cleeton's first two books. This one follows three different perspectives, or three different storylines, and how these three women's stories are connected within each other. All of the events that are happening around this hurricane. You have one of the characters who is searching for her brother who's in the military. You have the one character from the Perez family who's just recently married and is moving to the United States for the first time. And then you have another main character who is escaping an abusive relationship, and kind of everything that ensues with how these three women end up meeting and how their stories end up connecting. I thought this was absolutely beautiful. Again, Chanel Cleeton, I've mentioned before, is an auto-buy author for me. I'm super excited to continue to read the rest of the books in this series, but this book was absolutely incredible. The next book on this list is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This is my first Adam Silvera book that I've read, and I absolutely loved this one. This is a YA dystopian kind of contemporary novel, I would say. In the future, people receive phone calls and they know when they're going to die. So they get a phone call from this company who lets them know that they're going to be dying in the next 24 hours. And then these kids kind of have the opportunity to log into this app and find kind of a buddy to spend their last 24 hours with. This book follows our two main characters. They meet through this app when they are told that they are going to be dying within the next 24 hours. They meet, they build up this friendship and eventually a romance, and it was just absolutely amazing. This book was just incredibly written. Adam Silvera just ripped my heart out and stomped on it. It was crazy. It was so good. It was beautiful. It was wonderful. The ending, I feel like some people may love, some people may hate. I absolutely loved the way that the whole thing ended. It was just it was so poetic. I loved this book. I loved this romance. I loved the friendship between these two main characters, and I want to read more about Adam Silvera. I thought this was awesome and absolutely had to make my list of favorites as soon as I finished it. And the next book on my list of favorites is Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. This is an adult contemporary that follows two different perspectives. It follows Morgan, who is the daughter, and Clara, who is the mother, so it's going back and forth between the two. Clara was a young mother who got pregnant very young and had Morgan. And then when certain events happen, I don't really want to spoil too much of it because it's nice to go into this book fairly blindly. When a certain event happens, in their family, there are certain secrets that are revealed that kind of flip Morgan and Clara's life upside down, and all of the things that kind of ensue after they find out about this big secret that's been being kept in their family for the longest time. I thought this was absolutely incredible. There's such a great exploration of a relationship between a mother and a daughter, and kind of how they deal with not just chaos and not just, you know, sadness and tragedy in their family, but how they deal with rejection and with betrayal and with so many hard things. It talks about love and anger and just, I absolutely love this one. Colleen Hoover is an amazing writer, and I have enjoyed so many of her novels. My wife and I love her books and love reading them and talking about them and discussing them afterwards. This one was just, I feel like it's one of Colleen Hoover's best. I read It Ends With Us a few years ago and absolutely loved this, and I feel like Regretting You is definitely on par. I feel like that book is the top one. It Ends With Us is probably my favorite Colleen Hoover, but Regretting You is definitely a close second. I love this one. Again, I love the relationship between the two main characters, mother and a daughter, and how this just like, so many things that happen. I don't really want to get too much into it because you have to read it if you guys enjoy Colleen Hoover, if you guys enjoy adult contemporaries. This is definitely one that you need to check out because this is so addicting and so great, and I absolutely loved this one. The next book on my list of favorites is Dealing in Dreams by Lilian Rivera. This is a YA dystopian that is very heavily influenced by Latinx culture as well, and it is set in the future where there are these kind of gangs that are all competing to earn a spot in this tower where all of the rich, wealthy people live, and there's this kind of drug that these wealthy people sell called sueños, or dreams. People become very addicted to this drug, and it's kind of running rampant everywhere. And then you have our one main character who's part of one of these rival gangs who is trying their best to earn this spot in this tower so that she doesn't have to struggle with all of the things that people in this world struggled with. This world is run and overtaken by females completely. Females are the one in power. Men are usually the ones in this world that are taken as kind of the slaves, if you will, or servants, and they're the ones that have to do all of like the dirty work while women kind of run everything. I really, really enjoyed this novel from the very beginning. It is gritty and dark and brutal at times, and I just really loved the fact that even though I've read a lot of YA dystopians, this felt very fresh and very unique on the take of this genre. I really enjoyed Lilian Rivera's writing. I'd never read another book by her before. This is the first that I've encountered her writing, and I really enjoyed it. I really want to read some more by this author, but this was just great. I feel like it's great as a standalone. If it would have been a series, it would have been nice, but I really don't mind the fact that so far it's a standalone. You get somewhat of an arc at least done in this first book, so if she doesn't come out with any more books in this series, it's fine. You feel satisfied with everything that happens in this story, but it was just great. Everybody that they encounter throughout this mission to find these things to get them into this tower was just awesome. I absolutely loved it. Again, this was an amazing world, and I highly recommend it if you guys have not lost your faith in YA dystopians and you're still curious about some YA dystopians out there. I highly recommend this one. And the next book on my list of favorites is We Set the Dark on Fire by Taylor K. Mejia. This is, I would consider, a dystopian Jane Austen novel. If you guys have read Jane Austen before, just picture kind of that regal, 19th century type book set in a dystopian world. In this world, women kind of go to this finishing school, and they are taught to be wives, and they're taught to be, to raise children and to run households and everything, because men are able to choose 2 wives when they come of age. Now, one of the women being chosen is in charge of bearing children and raising the children, and the other woman is kind of in charge of running the household and kind of managing the husband's schedule and doing kind of like the secretary work, I would say. So when the main character gets placed in a home with her school rival, kind of things begin from there, because these 2 women, obviously they can't stand each other, and they're now having to live in this house together and kind of be married to the same man and run this household together. and kind of work in unison, which they're not used to doing. And I really enjoyed kind of that dynamic in there. I really loved this world. Throughout this, you have, you know, as well, you have this kind of rebellion going on to kind of bring down this society that's forcing women into these kinds of roles, into these lives, because it's really the only opportunity that women have in this society is to get married or be poor, and that's really all they have. So they really don't have many options. So seeing these two women nitpicking at each other, and then eventually becoming friends, and then eventually leading on to other things, is just great to kind of see this growth between the two main characters. There's spies in here and double agents, and it's really a fun read, and very unexpected for me. I did not know what I was expecting going into it at all. I hadn't even read the synopsis of this book before I started reading it, and I absolutely loved this one. Again, if you guys enjoy Jane Austen novels, if you guys think that Jane Austen dystopian kind of mix is something interesting or something you might want to read, I highly recommend you guys checking this out. This is another kind of Latinx themed world and characters that I really enjoyed and I highly recommend. And the next book on my list of favorites is Flamecaster by Cinda Williams-Chima. This is the first novel in the Shattered Realms series. This is the sequel / companion series to the Seven Realms series by Cinda Williams-Chima. And this takes place, I believe it's about 20 years or so after the events of the original series, Seven Realms, and it follows the children of the characters of the first book, and I want to leave it at that. I don't really want to spoil the events of the first book, or the first series, if you guys haven't read it already and are interested in doing that. This is YA fantasy. It was absolutely amazing. I loved these characters in the story, and I loved this, I feel like, more than the original series. Going into this one, I didn't really know what to expect. But I absolutely loved this one. The new characters, the new setting, the new storyline, the dragons that are in this one as well, because there were no dragons in the first series, and there are dragons in this series. I just absolutely loved this one so much. I had to make my list of favorites. This just kept getting better and better and better as it kept going, because you have these characters that are being hunted because they have these special kind of stones or gems encrusted into the backs of their necks, which give them special abilities, but people don't really know what these abilities are. They don't know what they do or anything. They just know that these people are special. They're being hunted, and somebody wants these people that have these special jewels. I still don't know why they're being hunted yet. Obviously, that's going to be revealed in the following books, but this was just so much fun. I highly recommend you guys checking out. If you guys, you know, there are minor spoilers in this series for the original series, so if you guys haven't read it, I still would recommend you guys reading it, because there are characters in this series that are in the original series that it's nice to kind of have their backgrounds if you guys have read the first series already, Seven Realms. So if you guys have read Seven Realms, haven't started Shadow Realms, I highly recommend it. This first book started so good, and I absolutely loved it, and I had to make my list of favorites. And the last book on this list of favorites is Homie by Danez Smith. This is a collection of poetry, and I've been wanting to read more poetry. And Stephanie from the channel Time to Read recommended I check out Danez Smith, and I did, and I absolutely loved it. It's kind of hard to give a synopsis on a poetry collection because it's poetry, but these are poems about being black in America and gay and just prideful and so many great things. It deals with family and loss and culture and just it's wonderful. It's great. I absolutely loved this poetry collection. I ended up reading 2 poetry collections by Danez Smith at the very end of the year and absolutely loved them, but Homie was just, it was great. If you guys want to read more poetry, I highly recommend you guys checking out this author, because they are wonderful. These poems were awesome and just raw and just straight. It was, I don't even know what else to say. I absolutely love this poetry collection, and I highly recommend you guys checking them out as well. So yeah guys, that is it for my list of favorite books of 2020. Comment down below, let me know what your guys' favorites are. If you guys read any of the ones that I read, what your thoughts are on them, I would absolutely love to know. Thank you guys all again for watching, and I will see you all next time.